Hey there nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back in another episode of Commander Cheapskate Gamer Reviews. This series goes over the various products, tools, and equipment that is necessary in the miniatures wargaming hobby. And on today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Games Workshop's latest publication for Necromunda, which is the Necromunda Core Rulebook for 2023. And what we're going to be asking ourselves is one important question when it comes to this product: should you buy it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go over this book that came out this week, and what I'm going to do is give you my thoughts and opinions about the different parts and the contents within this book as well. We'll give a little brief description of exactly what's inside the book in terms of its contents, and then we'll talk about some of the important updates that I think will have the biggest impact on campaign play. And of course, we'll provide your overall feedback in the end about whether we think this is a good or bad product for you to purchase with our conclusion. Now, because this video will be a little bit more of a deeper dive, I will put timestamps down in the description box below so that way you can click and navigate through the video as you want to see whatever part applies to you the most. So that being said, let's go and give our overall opinions and thoughts on the Necromunda Core Rulebook for 2023 and whether or not you should buy it. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about the contents of the new Core Rulebook for 2023. And first of all, let's talk about what exactly is inside of this book for you to look at. So you can take a look at the contents, but for the most part though, what it contains is the rules for both games that take place in the Underhive of Necromunda as well as the Ash Waste, and they combine it all into one rulebook, which is really nice as well. So if you didn't get a chance to purchase the Ash Waste rulebook, for example, you don't have to really worry about those because those vehicle rules and such are inside this. Now, I say this with a caveat. I'm talking about the general gameplay rules is what I'm talking about. Those are the rules I'm talking about, like what you do in the action phase and the end phase for both your fighters as well as vehicles. I'll talk about here in a little bit in the next slide what this book doesn't contain, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, the nice thing about this as well is it talks about, like I said before, what kind of actions you can take for your fighters as well as for your vehicles inside of the Underhive as well as out in the Ash Waste, which is kind of nice as well. At the same time, the really nice thing about this, which I probably think is the most important part, there's an index to it, to this book. In the previous rulebook, there wasn't an index, so it was very hard to navigate to find, very specific pieces of information you're looking for in your games in Necromunda. You had to use the table of contents and then kind of thumb through the rulebook to find what you're looking for. The fact that they have an index is kind of nice. One of the things I never cared about for Games Workshop's Necromunda rules is that they kind of have a really bad disorganization problem with the flow of information. It's kind of like randomly kind of scattered throughout the entirety of the book, so you're flipping through 3 or 4 different parts of the book. So having this index is really nice, and having you be able to do that, which is really great as well. Another thing that this book also contains are some new updates to different facets of the game, such as injuries, such as skills, scenarios, that kind of thing. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later in the video when we talk about the video updates. So that's what this book does contain. So now that we're done talking about what the book does contain, let's talk about what it doesn't contain. Alright, so if you're trying one of those players who are buying this book because you think you'll find gang creation rules, I'm going to tell you right now, pump the brakes. They're not in here, okay? There are no creation rules whatsoever in this setting. So in any of the different gangs that are available out there, there's no creation rules for those. And same thing with vehicles. There are no vehicle creation rules in this booklet as well. They give you the rules that you need to play games of vehicles in the Ash Waste, but they don't give you any of the different vehicle types. They don't give you any of the different types of vehicle equipment, how you go about making those vehicles, etc. So if you're looking for a supplement that has those rules in it, unfortunately this book does not have those, so don't go there, okay? It's not going to be in this booklet. Same thing with information regarding alliances. There are no rules about alliances at all in this book. Same thing with brutes, hanger-ons, hired guns, etc. They do have some rules for some of the exotic beasts that you can purchase for your gangs, such as hacks, cyber mastiffs, and grapple hawks, things of that nature. But in terms of like bounty hunter rules, sloppers, what else? Dramatis personae, hive scum, etc. That's not in these books at all. I think the reason why is because those rules are in the different gang supplements, and I think that's the reason why they did so. So if you are interested in playing Necromunda and you're looking for the creation rules for your particular gang, you will have to buy the supplement book for whatever gang you want if you want to get those rules officially anyways, in order to create your gang that way. This is just basically, this booklet, the core rule book just has the rules to play the game, but not to create anything. So that's the way I like to look at it when it comes to this resource. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the updates that are now available in this supplement. So first of all, probably one of the biggest impacts that took place at this new creation with this new core rule update is on damage. So let's talk about some of the things that take place when it comes to damage on this one. So you still have your typical out of action, serious injury, as well as flesh wound type of thing. But the nice thing about this though is that serious injuries now are a little bit more deadly in the games of Necromunda. Before, whenever you inflict a serious injury on your opponent, the guy would just lay down, wasn't able to do much of anything except crawl around for the most part, and that was pretty much it. Now, while that was a powerful game mechanic where your enemy had a fighter who was just down and not doing much of anything, it also was kind of frustrating because the guy would never, go out of action, etc. Well, now what ends up happening is now when you put a serious injury on your opponent, they start taking flesh wounds. For every time they stay seriously injured at the end phase, they take an additional flesh wound, so it's kind of like a clock where their toughness is slowly counting down until eventually they just bleed out and automatically go to action. Plus, additional serious injuries also stack as well. So let's pretend you attack an opponent, and let's say you put with 2 damage dice, for example, and let's say you roll 2 serious injuries. Okay, so he automatically gets serious injured, so your enemy fighter goes down. They take a flesh wound from that, and the second serious injury die roll puts another flesh wound on top of that. So let's pretend you're fighting an opponent who's only got 3 toughness. They lose 2 points of toughness for those 2 flesh wounds, and if they stay seriously injured for the end phase of that round, they'll automatically go to action because if you have 0 toughness, you can't play in the game. So that's one of the biggest changes that have taken place in this game as well. Another huge thing that has also changed was the injuries table. So the lasting injuries table has been totally revamped. So if you're interested in getting those, the rules for this, that is exactly that. For those who are veteran players in Necromunda who played when the Necromunda first came out in the early mid-90s, these new injuries are going to be very much familiar to you because they're pretty much this. They basically took those old injuries and they just included it now in the update. So for example, you have things like impressive scars, for example, which gives you a bonus to your cool. You also have horrid scars as well. You also have bitter enmity, which means that your fighter gets injured by another fighter from the opposing gang, basically has hatred for that and gets bonuses to attack that guy. You have a brand new condition now called Convalescence, which is a brand new mechanic for this edition, and we'll talk about that here in a second about how that works. You also have partially deafened, which basically means you lose some points for your initiative and such. You also have multiple injuries now, so you can take D3 lasting injuries on a fighter and they actually have you impact that way. And captured is now back, so instead of just rolling randomly on fighters who are seriously injured on the tabletop or out of action, now your fighter, if they're injured, they can be captured by your opponents now. So that's something you got to take into consideration now when it comes to this new set of rules. Now, like I said before, there is a brand new game mechanic now called Convalescence, so you still have recovery as well. The rules, those are still the same, but Convalescence is a new one. What that basically means is that your fighter can't take any post-battle actions, is what it is. Okay, so it's kind of like getting out cold in Necromunda before, where your guy was out of action and they couldn't take those actions again. But now Convalescence has been spread out throughout several of the injuries as well, so that way you don't have to worry about having a fighter being out almost for a longer period of time because of recoveries, because they're still going to recovery. So that's some of the things this guy should kind of neat. So for example, I believe impressive scars, for example, if you get that lasting injury, you go into Convalescence. You don't have to go into recovery, but I have to double check on that one. But things of that nature. So that's something you can also look forward to as well. So those are some of the updates that you see now when it comes to the new injury table and damage in the game. Now, another big change, of course, that's taking place is when it comes to gaining experience now, which is also a new one. So, for example, you now have different experiences you get for different actions that you take as well. For example, when we're talking about putting injuries on fighters, traditionally, the only way you got experience from your games for your fighters is if you put an enemy out of action, which you got an experience point for. That's still applicable to this game. Same thing with game bonuses. If you put a champion or a leader out of action, that's still the same as well. Same thing with wrecking vehicles. That's also the same as it is in the Ashway. So those are pretty much the same. Now, there are some updates and some differences now. For one of them, if you put a serious injury on your opponent, you automatically get an experience point as well. So that's something you want to take into consideration, which is really cool now. So now being able to gain experience is much easier now for fighters in order to do so on the battlefield. Another thing as well that you also get experience point for is also providing assistance and recovery tests. So let's pretend you have a fighter who got a serious injury and you have another fighter who provides assistance to that person so that way they can re-roll their dice to make a better recovery. You get experience for that now. So the ability for you to provide aid is more, what's the word I'm looking for, is incentivized for you to do that, to actually take that time to commit fighters, to assist your other fighters who are downed, so that way they can gain additional experience from that. So that's something that's also really cool too. At the same time, there's also a brand new piece that's added to the experience chart, where if you can spend 12 experience points, you can pick a skill of your choice from the secondary tree for your gang. So that's kind of nice, because that option was not provided there as well. And also for your gangers, if you roll a 12 for your gangers, when they gain experience on a 12, they not only do they get promoted to specialist, but they also gain a random primary skill as well. So they kind of made that little addendum to the experience table, which is actually kind of nice. Alright, so next thing we're going to talk about real quick is some of the updates that we have for the battles, as well as campaigns and scenarios that are now available as well. So the nice thing about there's a couple things. First of all, regardless of what environment you play in, whether you're playing in the Underhive or the Ash Waste, every player now can put at least one loot casket on the battlefield, so that's some way you can actually gain some credits for yourself, and to also increase some money generating abilities for your gang, which is also kind of nice as well. Another thing that's really nice too is that the rules for both the Underhive as well as the Ash Waste environmental rules, such as near waste, far waste, wild wastes, same thing with the different seasons, they're also included in this as well. So for example, when it talks about those rules, they're not as in depth, the Ash Waste environmental rules are not as in depth as the original Ash Waste rulebook that came in with the starter box set. The Ash Waste environmental rules for the starter box sets rulebook was much more comprehensive and had a lot more different options and a lot more detailed options as well. The Ash Waste environmental rules that they provide in this core rulebook are very similar to the Book of the Wasteland, Book of the Outlands supplement that came out earlier this year. So if you have the Book of the Outlands and you have you look at those environmental effects, they're very similar. In fact, I think they're almost the same actually. At least from where I looked at it, it appeared that way to me. So if you already have the Book of the Outlands and you're looking for some more Ash Waste or different Ash Waste environmental rules, that's not going to be in this core rulebook. So keep that in mind as well. Now, another thing that's also interesting about this is that they also provide brand new campaign variants that you can use for your Dominion campaign. Dominion campaigns have always been the cornerstone of most Necromunda campaigns, and they've still maintained those rules in this rulebook. Same thing with a lot of the scenarios from the original rulebook are also in this as well. There are some few updates to it. There's so many of those small little tweaks. I can't really go into all the detail because otherwise we'd be here for hours, but there are some little minor differences that are changing there. They also include some of the Ash Waste specific rules from the Ash Waste rulebook that came out with the original box set. They're also included in this core rulebook, so that part's kind of nice as well. And there's some ways you can do some things like campaign variants. For example, there's the Iron Man campaign variant that the book talks about, where basically you create your gang, but they cannot resupply, they can't recruit new fighters, nothing. Whatever you have when you start is what you have for the entirety of the campaign. And that's like an example of one of the variants they provide as well. Another thing they also do too is they also provide the general gang tactics, which is kind of nice as well. They give you like a little spreadsheet you can use to put your own little different tactics that you can have. They also give you some rules about how you can go about selecting those tactics, whether you get to choose them or you roll for them. So they have rules for that, which is kind of nice. And they also include the underdog rules. I'm not sure if a lot of you guys remember, but back in the day, a couple of years ago, Games Workshop released a stack of deck of cards called Underdog Rules, which basically, if you did certain things, if you had a vast difference between your gang values, they basically give you a stack of objectives that you can get additional money, experience, that kind of thing. So they included those rules now in this, which is actually kind of cool too. So if you're looking for that kind of information, this rulebook does have those in it. Alright, so let's talk about skills now. So they do have update for skills. Most of the skills are exactly the same as they were in the original rulebook, so there isn't much difference there. However, there are a few exceptions that I am going to talk about in this video, which actually stood out to me the most. For example, Iron Jaw now is useful. The bronze skill Iron Jaw was only useful if you got struck by an opponent who didn't have any weapons. They did unarmed attacks to you. Now it's a little bit different now. Now it's for any weapon, so long as there's no modifier for a negative modifier for your armor penalty. You basically can go with, you can use that Iron Jaw skill to help you out. So if your opponent is shooting at you with the last pistol, for example, Iron Jaw skill counts, which is actually kind of nice as well. Overseer also is a little bit different as well. Overseer rules are pretty much the same as always. The only difference now is that your leader has to take a leadership test first before they can use Overseer on your fighter. So that's a little thing that they actually added on there as well, which kind of makes sense because to be able to boss someone around like that, you should be able to exude your leadership to do that, which I'm totally fine with. And then of course you also have the Metacase skill. The Metacase skill now has actually been radically updated, which is kind of nice now. So it's actually very useful now. What you can do now is that you do a treat wounds basic action. You can either take off a flesh wound or heal back a wound for your down fighter, which is kind of nice. So, for example, if your champion loses a wound and a fighter with Medicaid comes up to them, they can make him go back to full wounds, which is kind of nice as well. Or take away flesh wounds slowly, which is kind of nice too, especially when you consider the fact that now serious injuries do cause flesh wounds, which is actually kind of cool too. So those are some of the skill updates that I noticed in this current rulebook. Alright, so let's give you our overall conclusion on this product. So Necromunda Core Rulebook for 2023, should you buy it? Now, this is going to be the first time ever I'm going to say this. It kind of depends on your situation. Usually when I do game reviews, I usually say, yeah, go for it, or no, don't go for it. And this one's kind of weird because I'm kind of on the fence on this one, even now for a lot of new players out there, as well as for a lot of people. So it just kind of depends, and that's why this video is kind of weird, because there are some facets that I would say, yeah, you should get it. But there's also some facets about it where I would say, no, don't get it. It just kind of depends on who you are. Now, let's talk about that for example. For example, if you're a brand new player, like you're interested in playing Necromunda, but you have nothing, no rule books, not even a box of miniatures to play with, then I would suggest getting it. The reason why is because it has enough rules for the Underhive as well as the rules for the Ash Waste to where you can have fun playing in both those environments. Now granted, it will not have the nuances of say like Law Misrule campaign rules or Dark Uprising rules, or what else I'm looking for, like settlement rules. They won't have those, okay? So keep that in mind. This book is not a catch-all. It's not like they took all the rule books and put them into one, because that's not what this product is. This product is only designed for players who want to play in the Ash Waste and also in the Underhive as well. However, there is a flip side to that. There are no creation rules in this rule book. So if you're wondering about how to create a gang or how to create vehicles to play in the Ash Waste, this book does not have those rules in it. So for example, let's say that you're a brand new player and let's say you want to play Orlok, for example. You're like, okay, I'm a brand new player. I want to play House Orlok. What would I need? I would suggest getting the core rulebook so that way you have all the rules you need to play the game, but you will need to buy the supplement House of Iron, which has all the rules associated for your gang, as well as their hang-arounds and their boots, etc. And you would need that, and you'll also probably need to get the Book of the Outlands, so that way you get the vehicle creation rules. So that's something that you would have to say you will have to do. Now let's pretend that you're an experienced player like myself, or for many other people out there who's already been playing Necromunda. Whether you should get this rulebook or not kind of depends on whether you feel that the updates that I talked about in this video are worth spending the money to get it. That's what I would basically equate it to. There are a lot of updates and a lot of changes, but there are no game-changing or really critical changes that will require you to purchase it, in my opinion. For me though, because I'm kind of a stickler for some of the, I'm kind of a stickler because I thought it was kind of neat seeing those Nito kind of bringing back those old injuries, and Nito that they brought some new ways to get experience. I thought it was kind of cool, and I was also curious to see what this rulebook contained, so I purchased it for that. I don't regret my purchase because I think the information is quite valid still, so that's on me. But for other players, that may not be the case. They might not want to spend the money to purchase this book, and that's perfectly fine if you don't want to. The changes and updates are not so critical that you could not just keep playing the way you've been playing the entire time and still enjoy the game. So that's why I'm kind of on the fence on it. It just kind of depends on where you're at. The updates are nice, like I said before, but they're not so critical that you cannot, it would change the game in some monumental way that's totally different than what you're currently playing. So depending on your situation and what you're looking for and what you're not looking for this product, I would say act accordingly. And that's my overall conclusion for this. So that's good for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Feel free to leave any questions in the description box down below. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have about this rulebook. I love interacting with you guys, so no problem there at all. So that's good for this review, you guys. Until the next time, peace out and stay classy. We'll catch you guys in the next one.